Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the November 2024 session of the Richmond Art Gallery's Artist Salon series, featuring our guest artist today, Malina Sintnicolaas. My name is Kathy Tykolis. I'm the Richmond Art Gallery's Education and Public Programs Coordinator, and I'm here to host our program today online and in person at the Richmond Art Gallery, and I'll be here to moderate all your questions for those of you online as well at the end of the session. First, on behalf of the Richmond Art Gallery Association, I'd like to welcome you all, wherever you are, online or in person, to the Richmond Art Gallery, which is located on the traditional and ancestral lands of the Hunkaminam speaking peoples, which are the nations that lived all along the Fraser River Delta. And I would like to thank everyone for being here tonight as we try out this whole hybrid live stream thing. And thank you to all of you out there online who are joining us tonight as well. In a few moments, I will introduce our guest presenter. She will be doing a visual presentation of her works, and then we will follow up with time for Q&A from both our online and our in-person audience tonight. So first, a few housekeeping notes, mainly for those of you who are online. For those of you who might be new to the Artist Salon, this is a monthly program. It is free for artists. It's hosted for visual artists to help build up community, professional development tips, and to just grow our artist community here in the Lower Mainland. It is hosted every February to November, so this will be the last session of 2024, hoping to come back in 2025, which is why I was in Grand Hill today. So we'll see. The goal of the program really is to offer all you visual artists out there a mix of professional development, tips, advice, along with just artists' personal stories of how they make it work and how to keep on making your work. I want you to also know it exists as a Facebook group, and the Facebook group is a private group that I host and post mainly only other opportunities. So things like artist residencies, artist calls, that type of thing. Of course, as the community, though, you are welcome to post any of your openings or events that might be happening as well. So you can join our Facebook Artist Salon group. If you go to the Richmond Art Gallery website, you'll find out info about that and a link for that if you would like to join, as well as on our website, you can see some of our past recorded sessions of salons that have covered many, many different topics over the years. Tonight's session, for the first hour anyway, will be recorded and will be hosted as an online video for you to look at later on our YouTube channel or on the Richmond Art Gallery website. At the end of tonight's session, though, for those of you staying here, as I mentioned, we get some tea and treats. See what you missed out by not. So that's housekeeping out of the way. I would like to introduce our guest artist, Malina Sintnicolaas, on a topic near and dear to my heart, which is teaching. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm going to quickly introduce Malina just with her short bio, and then she will take it away and share her presentation. So Malina Sintnicolaas is a mixed media artist and educator currently based in Vancouver, British Columbia, the traditional ancestral territories of the Coast Salish peoples. With a practice focused mostly in ceramic and fiber sculpture, her works are considered to be manifestations, transmutations, or petrifications of emotions into a physical form. Drawn to tactile materials, her work is questioning ways in which one can represent emotions such as depression, trauma, and anxiety with a physical form, and in what ways one can induce empathy for an object, even if that object is alien or abstract. Working with textures, surface, material properties, and form, her sculptures are bodily, visceral, and drive to evoke feeling from the viewer, using effect to create an empathetic. Oh, you're really making me read big words here now. I was doing so well till that word. Empathic landscape that will urge an understanding for states of mind which are difficult to be described verbally. She received her BFA from York University and completed her Master of Fine Arts at Emily Carr University of Art and Design. She has shown her work in solo and group exhibitions within Canada and the United States, including the Burrard Arts Foundation in Vancouver, Art Muir in Montreal, Sculptors Alliance, New York City, and the Canadian Sculpture Centre in Toronto, Ontario. She is the recipient of the 2019 Audain Travel Award and the Wanley Scholarship of the Sculpture Society of Canada and the 2022 BC Arts Council Project Assistant Grant, respectively. Malina is currently teaching studio art at the Richmond Arts Centre and the Port Moody's Art Centre. So welcome, Lena. So happy to have you here. And really looking forward to your insightful talk tonight. As I said, we will do our in-person questions at the end. And just as a side note, myself and my lovely assistant, Melanie, both have also been teaching artists for a very long time. So we will probably chime in every now and then, just to warn you. But on the other hand, we welcome all your questions because it is a very big topic. So Melina, I will let you take it away. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Kathy. Thank you for the introduction. And yeah, thank you so much also to Melanie and also the Richmond Art Gallery for having me tonight for the Artist Salon. And thank you so much, everyone who's attending both in person with me here and also online. So tonight I'll be talking about starting a teaching practice to support your career as a practicing artist and things to consider when going into teaching, or else even things that you can apply to a current teaching practice as well. And I'll definitely be sharing my own personal experience and lessons that I've learned along the way, and also talking about different teaching formats that might work best for you and things to consider when going into those formats. So I really look forward to talking with you tonight. So yes, so I am also a practicing visual artist alongside my teaching practice. As Kathy mentioned, I focus mostly in ceramic sculpture, and fiber and textile installation. And I do consider my works to be manifestations or even petrifications of emotions with a physical form. And I'm essentially questioning in what ways can I induce empathy for an object, even if that object is unrecognizable or abstract. So I work a lot with texture, surface, repetition, material properties, and a lot of my forms, especially when I am working very heavily with abstraction, they take on a very organic and bodily shapes, which I incorporate with the subject matter that I'm working with. So I received my Bachelor of Fine Arts in Visual Arts and Art History at York University, and then I completed my Master of Fine Arts at Emily Carr University of Art and Design. And I began teaching as a teaching assistant at Emily Carr University, and then I was also a teaching fellow while I was completing my grad studies there. And then I currently teach between here at the Richmond Art Center, where I teach ceramics and visual arts. And then I also teach at the Port Moody Arts Center, where I teach I teach only ceramics there. And I find that teaching between these two art centers right now has really helped me not only bring in a supportive income to my practice, but it also has helped me be able to do what I love every single day and what I'm passionate about. And so I primarily teach intermediate and beginner lessons to adults and teenagers, but then I also teach more introductory and beginner lessons to younger teens and children ages 9 to 12. So I personally find that my teaching practice and my studio practice are both very balanced and interconnected. Not so much with subject matter, but definitely with the materials that I work with. I work with pretty much the exact same materials in both practices, and both of them get ideally the equal amount of attention. Neither really takes precedence over the other. I put the same amount of energy and work into both of them, which isn't always the same for every educator out there, but that's certainly how I want to continue and how I want to keep pursuing both my teaching and my visual arts practice. So when you should consider going into teaching art. So in this talk tonight, I am speaking from the perspective that you are a practicing artist, potentially an emerging or a mid-career artist, and are considering getting into teaching to support your art practice. Perhaps you are just out of art school or are just finishing art school and are considering going into teaching to support your income. Or maybe you already have quite a heavy teaching practice and are considering changing formats or just things to consider. But whichever viewpoint you're coming from, I think that this information it would be considered useful. And also too, I am speaking specifically from a visual arts perspective, but I do think that this can be cross-disciplinary. So whether you are teaching performance art, music, or else even digital media, I think these are all good things to consider. Attributes that make a good teacher. So I recommend going into teaching if you have a passion, experience, and knowledge in your craft and a desire to share your abilities with others. You should also have been practicing your craft, whatever that is, for a few years, that you have experience, knowledge, and confidence in sharing those abilities with others. You should also have strong leadership skills and be able to command and lead a group of people, and also have strong collaborative skills. When forming a classroom, whether it's for a workshop for a couple of days or else for a few months for a whole semester, you're creating a small community, and therefore you'll be meeting a lot of different personalities. You'll be working with a lot of different learning types, and therefore you have to be adaptable to that as a teacher. And you want to make sure that you're able to convey information to different learning types. I can't really pinpoint the exact moment that I knew I wanted to go into teaching, or else at least taking it seriously as a profession. But I knew throughout university when I was pursuing my bachelor's degree that I had good leadership skills. I was good at, or I was put in a few situations where I was meant to organize students. And also for the 4 years of my undergrad, I worked as a sculpture studio assistant, where under the professors and under the technicians, myself and the other assistants would essentially help other students who were working during open studio with very basic sort of questions and needs. And then it wasn't until I pursued my Master of Fine Arts, where I was a teaching assistant for 2 semesters, and then I was a teaching fellow for where essentially that's where a grad student takes on directing a university course under the mentorship of an existing professor there. And that was when I really knew that I was quite good at teaching. I really enjoyed working with students, and I enjoyed seeing them learn and grow in the space. And so that was really when I knew that I wanted to pursue this. When you should not consider going into teaching, and that is completely okay. So teaching is not for everyone, and that's completely okay, just like every job does not fit every person. Teaching especially does not fit every personality type. And while I do agree that you won't always know if you're good at teaching unless you try, there are some occasions where I would caution someone from choosing teaching as a profession, especially if you are interested in teaching out of an institution where you will be signing a contract usually by semester, and especially if you are looking into teaching children. You cannot choose to teach solely for personal gain alone, whether that's emotional or financial. When you're teaching in community with others, and you're going to be teaching with many different personalities and many different learning abilities. So you're going to have good days and some bad days, just like any job. But to the best of your ability, you must know how to regulate your emotions. And especially when you're working with students, you cannot teach for your own personal gain alone. So you can't just go in to want to control people or because you yourself want validation. I believe you should be going into the job with an interest and a love for teaching and wanting to better others' learning with the knowledge that you have to share. So your gratification is not the only one that should matter. It's also the student's experience as well. And you want to make sure that you're leading the classroom by example. You want to make sure if you want their respect, you also need to respect them as people. And also, in frankness, teaching doesn't guarantee a high income all the time. funding gets cut from a lot of programs, and there's not always a guarantee that you'll have enough students to enroll in a class or workshop. Therefore, you'll have to cancel because you're not able to pay for the class itself. And there's also so much competition because there are so many teachers out there of various experience levels who are also looking for teaching jobs. So I don't say this to gatekeep or to fearmonger. I'm just saying that if you're interested in teaching, regardless of the level of teaching, it's best to do so because you enjoy doing it and you have an interest in educating people, not just for personal gain. So there's many different classroom formats and classroom and teaching formats that you can consider when going into teaching art. There's teaching out of a personal or private studio. There's public programming through galleries or artist-run centers. There's art centers and community centers where classes are programmed usually by semester, very much like the Richmond Art Center. And then there's public school and university. Each format completely depends on the teacher's education level, experience, and career goals. And I can speak as a teacher who has taught at university level, extracurricular, and also continuing education that you'll likely dabble in a few of these formats. You don't always get a teaching job where that's what you're sticking to the rest of your life. And then especially too, jobs might change or you might get hired at an institution where you have to move locations. So usually I can attest that it's very fluid. And it also depends on what you want to focus on. Do you want your teaching career to support your art practice, in which case your art practice will always take precedence? Or do you want to become a full-time educator in which your art practice becomes a bit more secondary? Or do you want to become a full-time educator in which you have to you want to teach at university level, or in which you might have to seek a higher education? It all depends on the person and their own goals. And oftentimes in visual arts, like I said, it's very fluid and there's no clear answers alone. But teaching workshops, for example, out of your own personal studio, it can be beneficial as it allows you absolute control over the session's format. You can schedule the workshop length, subject matter, you can schedule how many sessions that you want it to be. And you are also able to mold it to your own personal schedule as an artist, and all the proceeds go directly to your studio space and your art practice, obviously. But on the other hand, keep in mind that you are responsible for the course scheduling, the programming, enrollment, and promotional work and budgeting. So if you're someone who is able to work independently and is very organized, that's great. But if you sometimes like to work in a bit more in collaboration, sometimes some of the other options might be something to consider. Like public community programming through galleries and artist-run centers are quite similar to workshops out of your own studio, but each place is a little different here. Some spaces have their own programming to help with lessons and workshops, and then other times they just provide the space and the artist or the teacher is meant to schedule everything else and do the programming and enrollment. The benefits are, if they do have someone help with the programming and budgeting, a lot of pressure is then taken off yourself as the teacher, and you can instead work on focusing on the lesson or the workshop itself. But also, depending on the prominence of the gallery or the artist-run center, it can allow for better promotion and more guarantee of enrollment, sometimes even a larger budget, as a lot of these spaces are funded by grants. And then public art centers and community centers are really beneficial because they coordinate not only workshops, but also sessional courses for extracurricular classes for children, and then even night classes for adults that you can teach. And these centers are beneficial because all the organizing is done by the administration. You can also teach multiple formats. You could teach multiple classes per week, as well as take on a couple of workshops if desired. And it's great because as a teacher, your job is to simply lesson plan and then go in and teach. You don't have to worry about any of the extra administration stuff or purchasing materials. And I personally find it to be a great source of experience and income, no matter what level of teaching you are, whether you are just starting out or whether you have a bit more teaching experience. And then lastly, public school and university sometimes are a bit more different, in which case you're working directly out of an institution. And here you must create a course syllabus that you usually have to submit to the dean's office for approval, so they get an idea of the content you're about to teach. And in this case, you're teaching directly out of an institution, and you might also have to have a higher level of education. And if you don't have it already, you might have to get a master's degree, a PhD degree if you're teaching more so at university level. And then if you're going more so towards public school or elementary school, you're going to need teachers college. So these are all things to consider as to which formats work best for you. So which age groups work best for you as a teacher? There's a wide range of age groups that you can go in for teaching art. There's young children, older children, teenagers, adults, and even senior classes as well, especially if you go into teaching at a community center. As a teacher, I can say that it can take a while to realize which age groups and learning levels align with your teaching strengths, but I highly recommend to start with what you know. For me personally, since one of my first experiences as a teacher was at university level, and then later continuing studies, I knew that I was good at teaching adults and young adults. And then it wasn't until a little later when I started teaching at art centers that I took on teaching younger teenagers and then children ages 9 to 12, because I knew that I had experience working with those age groups in other professions as well. So reflect on your own life experience. For example, I know of people who know they work really well with younger children. Potentially they have gone into early childhood education and they really enjoy working with that age group. So then they work best taking on teaching children's classes. But if you've never had that experience before, I would highly recommend maybe starting with an older age group. The reason that I say this is because teaching children sometimes requires a different dialogue than teaching adults. And that's a dialogue that, is learned over time, especially if you have younger children in your life. But imagine how explaining rocket science, for example, would be different the way that you describe it to a 7-year-old versus a 25-year-old, right? You would use smaller words or simpler concepts for the 7-year-old. You might also describe it a lot quicker due to their attention span. And so that's the same kind of idea when you are teaching a classroom full of children. And you also have to keep in mind too that teaching children oftentimes requires a bit more patience. They're not emotionally developed yet, so they don't always know what's socially acceptable, or else sometimes they don't always know how to regulate their emotions the same way. And so as a teacher, you have to learn how to, correct it with kindness and be able to lead with empathy. And if you don't have experience with that just yet, I might recommend starting off with an older age group. So creating a course syllabus. So this is essential to any type of learning. Whether you're starting off with making a workshop, or especially if you are teaching extracurricular classes and then public school or college or university, it's definitely essential. When you are creating a syllabus, you're taking note of the classes you're about to teach, and you're trying to create a linear trajectory for how your students are going to build their skills in your space. I teach ceramics and then painting and drawing courses. Therefore, I try to map out my lessons for the semester by looking at the specific class or learning level and trying to anticipate what skills they're expecting to learn in the space. And then I'm trying to look at what assignments can I create where they can learn those skills. I try to think of each lesson as a pathway to the next. So try to think of which skills your students need to accomplish each assignment and then how you can sort of map them out chronologically. For example, in a lot of my introductory ceramics classes where no prior knowledge is needed working with the material, oftentimes the first assignment that I'll give is a pinch pot assignment. And for those of us that don't know, that's simply where you take a ball of clay and then you, with your hands, you gently pinch it into a vessel or a bowl. It's a very simple lesson or a very simple skill, but this introduces the students to understanding how clay reacts to, to being airborne, also to touch, also how it feels, and moderating how fast or how slow you need to work with it so that it doesn't crack. And this is a really beneficial project because it then teaches students how clay is going to react with other practices, or especially when we introduce students to the pottery wheel. It's essentially the same concept as a pinch pot. You're just now introducing water and a machine. So try to think of your syllabus in a way as a staircase. What steps they need to take to, get up to the next thing. And then also have room to change and adapt depending on what age groups you're teaching, and listen to the feedback from the students. In all teaching settings, the syllabus can change, even in public school or university where you have to submit it for approval. Usually the syllabus can change if needed. So as much as it's your responsibility to teach, it's also your responsibility to listen to your students. And if you notice that they all need more time with a lesson, or if it needs to be altered in a certain way, if you're just finding the group isn't responding to it, you need to be open to that. It depends on the age group, how I plan out the syllabus and also the education level. When I taught university, I was teaching sculpture at the time, and I had 2 minor technical assignments so students could understand the material without the pressure of trying to make a fully realized art piece. And then I would have 2 to 3 major artistic assignments where they would take the knowledge from their technical assignment and then apply it to an artwork to present that for critique. At art centers, I work a little differently because in a lot of art centers, you don't have to worry about grading. But usually for adults and for teens, every week, I will have a different lesson or demonstration, and then they would then apply that skill to their own art making. But I find that it kind of depends on the class, how I space it out. Sometimes I will have a lesson where we're doing something together, in which case I'll show them step by step how to do a certain skill, and they'll follow along on their own art piece with me. And then other times I will just show them a lesson, and then they can apply to their own artwork independently. But the thing is, with adults, they tend to want to take more time with a skill. They tend to want to really learn how to do it right. So sometimes you'll have an actual lesson, and then you should schedule a class that's just a work period. And then you're able to, let them finish their pieces and let them really be able to learn the process. But with kids, it's a little different because, again, you're working with a different attention span. Therefore, and since they always like to work a little quicker, I find, especially when you're introducing new art materials to them. So what I like to do with kids is every week I do have a lesson for them planned where they can make their own artwork. But just in case they work a little quickly through their assignment, I always have a backup project just in case they work through the assignment a little quick. So I always schedule 2 lessons just in case. So challenges that can arise when you are teaching in a classroom, regardless of the age group you're working with. Like I've said, you're creating a small community. And just like creating any other sense of community, problems can arise that can affect people individually. You are working with a bunch of different personalities in the same space, and from time to time, students can act out, or else sometimes the class might not be responding to you in the way that you prefer. The best advice that I can give is lead with kindness and wanting your students to be able to grow their skills, but also to be better people in in your space. Do not lead with ego or reactivity, as it will usually escalate a situation more and leave students with emotional harm. So I'm not trying to say like just let things pass over. I do believe in holding accountability if there's some sort of inappropriate behavior. And by all means, set your standards in your classroom as to what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. But what I'm saying is never lead with anger or with cruelty. I'm sure that we can all remember from when we were students, we probably had one or two teachers who would always resort to yelling at the class or else would really punish a student for acting out. And I don't know about you, but I don't remember those teachers very fondly from my past, and I never want to perpetuate that as a teacher. So do your best to, do your best to always regulate your emotions and don't get too reactive. And this, of course, can lead to one of the biggest issues that can arise when teaching, or teaching in addition to balancing a studio practice, and that's burnout. So burnout is inevitable. It certainly usually happens around the holiday season, usually the Christmas holidays, as well as I always find it's right before the summer holidays for me. I myself am not an expert in how to deal with burnout, as it's still something that I experience all the time as a teacher. However, the best advice that I can give is look after yourself, and whatever it looks like, try to prioritize self-care. This could look like setting boundaries for yourself. As soon as you finish the class, try to leave your stress and work in the classroom and don't bring it home with you to the best of your ability. I know that's easier said than done. Also, if you have to lesson plan or work from home, try to maintain a schedule for yourself. This could mean not answering emails on weekends or on a holiday, or else not doing lesson planning after a certain time in the evening. Maintain your mental and emotional well-being, whatever that looks like. Everybody's needs is completely different. And this could also look like saying no to certain opportunities. I know that this can be difficult as it can affect your income. And especially, I know sometimes when we're first starting out, we want to take every opportunity just in case they don't come back. But sometimes you have to lighten the workload in order to deal with burnout. I remember one of the boundaries I had to set for myself was not take on so many classes per semester, or else not scheduling myself for more than 2 classes per semester. And I found that that really helped me. And also ask for help. Talk to your supervisor, talk to your administrative team, to programming. And sometimes you might have to advocate for yourself a bit, but they are meant to help you and provide solutions. And also talk to your colleagues and how your other teachers are working with their classes, as that sense of community is very helpful. So despite the setbacks and the challenges that can be experienced with teaching and teaching art, I personally have to say from experience that I do love my job. I enjoy teaching people, I enjoy talking to people, and I especially enjoy seeing people learn, share, and grow in a new skill or a new art practice. There are absolutely difficult days, but I'm able to go into work every single day, talk about the subjects that I love, and work with people and introduce them to materials that are really great and fun to work with. I get to form meaningful connections with people. Oftentimes, students who resonate with your teaching, they'll take more classes of yours and they'll want to, and you get to be able to see them to learn and grow as artists in that time. And you get to see students take different approaches to your lessons and add their own voices to create their own art pieces. And I'm sure people who have already taught in this room can attest that one of the best feelings is seeing students or a student thrive in your teaching and see them be able to grow as artists and see their skills get better and better, especially if they take a few more classes of yours. And I can attest that it's one of the best feelings. So final thoughts, why we must keep teaching art. So I'm going to tell a bit of a personal story, but a little while ago, I had a student ask me a question. They asked me, with the rising of AI, what is the point of making art anymore? And this question was so sad to me. And I don't belittle this student's question since it's actually quite a good question. But as an arts educator, it's a bit of a heartbreaking one, because it was telling me that this individual and likely many other people who have already surrendered to this idea that with the existence of AI and also other societal factors that are causing us oppression and artist block, it's not necessary for us to create anymore. And this absolutely is not true. Humans must keep creating and expressing themselves. And also, if we're just going to narrow it down to AI, the irony is it's been programmed by a group of people who were and are considered creatives and creative thinkers, and it's now stealing art from artists by scanning algorithm upon algorithm to make its renditions of art. And so I bring this up because society needs people like us. They need educators, they need classes, they need art spaces. They need people who will encourage and introduce children, youth, adults, seniors to, and introduce them to art and encourage them to keep expressing themselves, to be creative, because the reality is sometimes, due to resources, due to upbringing, or due to career paths, people were either discouraged or did not have time to create. And us as art educators can make that space for that. I remember even for myself, when I was in high school and when I was feeling lost, a little discouraged by circumstance, and I was not doing well in math and sciences, I remember that one ceramics teacher who noticed that I had some artistic ability in the first year of when I was in the first year of high school. And she encouraged me to take a ceramic sculpture class. And it was from there that I went fully into the arts. In those 4 years of high school, I developed my portfolio, where I then applied to university and art school. And then, as you can see now where I sit, I never looked back. But I bring that up because she, my ceramics instructor, was one of the first people outside of my immediate family to encourage that in me and point me in the directions that I needed to go in to be successful of that. So us as arts educators, we have the benefit of being that person in people's lives that can create a special space where people can come in and learn to express themselves. And we can create a space for minimum of 2 hours. They can leave everything at the door and be able to learn a new art practice or a new form of art making. So yes, teaching art is a great method to support your own income and support your art practice. But this is also a really great way to benefit the community that you're living in. Thank you.
Thanks, Malina. I just want to check in with anyone here have questions. I also wanted to check in, how many of you have some teaching experience?
Okay,
Pretty much
quite a lot of you.
Yeah,
Very
most of
nice.
you. Okay, so were there any specific questions you had? And you're all teachers here too. So if there's any things you really wanted to know about, or maybe just shared experiences. Hold on.
Oh.
Hello.
Hi.
Yes, I also teach sometimes, like maybe 3 times per week,
Okay.
and then arrange from different age groups around from 4 to 12.
Oh.
And then one of the biggest challenge maybe you counter as well is that parents' expectation are different from what you can evaluate from kids. And they
Yeah.
often ask like, oh, can I achieve this with your class? Like they will show an example, and then like you have a clear understanding of the kid's skills, and you can kind of know how far this kid can go, but definitely
Yeah.
not to the point of the parents' expectation. Like, how do you communicate that, or how do you evaluate the situation?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, that's a really good question. I mean, I think something that as a teacher, you have to be okay with is the fact that sometimes you don't always have all the answers. And like, as much as you're there to provide and create that space and educate, it's like, you can't always guarantee to meet certain expectations. I think what I would recommend is to, set your standards at the beginning of the class. And what I sometimes do with children's classes is the first class, I'll have like an introduction where I invite the parents in. I know sometimes that's necessary for the much younger students where the parents will usually sit in, but I kind of keep them there to go through like the course intentions, class intentions, things like that, just so they get an understanding. But I don't know. The thing that I have to recommend is, from my experiences, I guess, like let the child sort of learn on their own. Like there's some expectations that just can't be met. I mean, as much as I would love to, see like a student become like a protege and everything, it's like, as much as that's so impressive, I never want to put that pressure on a child at the same time. I also want to make sure that it's a space where it feels safe, they can have fun and everything like that. So I think just trying to communicate that with parents, and also too, I think just keep parents updated on their progress so that and show them their artwork, like take them home, or let the students take them home the day of sometimes. And I find that that can sometimes ease some expectations, but you can't please everybody, I find. But that's a really good question. Thank you for your question.
Yeah. And I want to say I had that experience for sure. When I first started teaching at places like community centers, as a programmer, what I've learned is to make the course description as clear as possible.
Yeah.
Whenever I design a description for a course, I always have experiment, explore, play, even, just so parents know, I'm not teaching them step by step how to draw realistically, because so often that is an expectation.
Yeah.
It is, especially if they're very young, like, I've watched, really horrible scenes of parents yelling at a 6-year-old because they didn't do it right.
Yeah.
And as an artist, that breaks my heart. It's they're there to explore, to learn. And we really need, we all know there's that certain age kids hit where they're just like, I can't draw. So they just give up.
Yeah.
And I try to combat that as much as I can. So it really is like, this is about exploration. This is about trying things out. This is about just learning how materials work and what doesn't work. That's how artists make things, often by mistake. And trying to make that clear in the course description helps a bit, but those conversations with the parents will really help if you're getting someone who just doesn't, and if they don't agree with your philosophy. I mean, that's a really tough one. I've been fortunate enough to place myself in a place like this. I mean, which is why I was drawn to the, Richmond Art Gallery. And I actually initially was working at the Richmond Art Center too, of, we encourage play and experimentation. And if you're looking for, something more rigid and a definite, like, must reach this goal, then you might want to look for a different place. But, and there's other teachers that love teaching that way. So, I mean, I don't want to detract from that. Like, there are places like that. And if that's not your personal philosophy, if that's not your boss's philosophy, then, you have to try to somehow explain that. And I love that idea of sharing their work and showing their progress. And
And students, like, I mean, and also just adults too, you learn by messing up. Like that's how you learn the most in your art practice and everything. So even sometimes sharing like just even the mistakes, or else like in ceramics, that really wonky mug that can just hold like a little thimble of liquid, I'll just share that with them. And yeah, I find sometimes that's helpful. Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions? Sorry, you're talking to the mic for the online audience. Oh, okay.
You mentioned that you take sort of a 50-50 approach with your teaching and your artistic practice. What does that kind of look like for you? How do you maintain that balance?
Oh, that's a good question. And I try to maintain a 50-50. Sometimes it's like sometimes it's like a 45. But I think it goes back to setting boundaries. Like when I had a very heavy, I still have a very heavy course load. I was teaching this past semester, I think I was teaching about 5 classes a week. So it completely depends, but I think, when I definitely had a heavier course load than that, obviously just due to how much time there is in the day, then my art practice took a little bit more of a back seat. But I really think it is setting boundaries with your work and also yourself. So for me, I try to have ideally 2 days a week, but sometimes it goes down to 1 day a week where I'm just in my art studio. And if I'm able to, I don't answer a teaching email, or I don't do any lesson planning or any of that, it's like those days are just for me. And then also teaching out of art centers right now, beneficially, there is a little bit of a break between semesters, which my teaching practice lightens off a little bit, in which there's more time in the studio. But it's honestly, it's still something that I'm navigating for sure. I haven't had there's not always an easy grasp on it, but I think just making sure that you have at least a certain amount of time weekly that you go in. I kind of compare it to like going to the gym. Like it's like just or else making time to exercise or what have you. It's like just make sure you have at least 1 or 2 days that are dedicated to your studio practice. That's how I do it. Some folks might do it differently, but that's how I try to navigate it. Yeah. But thank you for your question.
Any other questions?
I'm just curious, over the years, have you ever had like you would consider your worst experience as a teacher that you almost quit, and how did you rise from that? How did you manage to?
Oh my goodness. Yes, to answer the first part, yeah, of course. I think I don't mean to reuse this answer again, but it really is boundaries. For me, it was really when I was exhausting. I took on a bit more than I could chew when it comes to the amount of classes to take on. And, of course I, finished the semester and work through them and everything, but I think I was teaching 8 classes a week. And it was equal amount of adult classes and equal amount of children's classes. And they were really great students and a lot of fun to work with, but that is a lot of emotional energy that I just found myself to be completely depleted by the end of the week. And so it wasn't like necessarily a specific situation, because the thing is, it's like, it depends on the situation, but in typical classroom settings, a child having a meltdown, like it's just going to be 30 minutes of your day. Sometimes it doesn't, or sometimes it's a little hard to deal with, or puts a little halt in the lesson or something like that. But that's nothing that's going to really very heavily affect you. Again, completely depends on the situation, but I found for me that I found I just had to really set a boundary with myself for how much work I took on. And so for that, it was like no more than 5 classes a week. And that was it. So yeah, I mean, I wish I had a more exciting answer. Maybe Kathy might have one, but yeah, that would probably be the one for me.
I mean, I think that's when you learn what age you work well with. Is
Mhm.
when it goes horribly wrong. I mean, it's gonna, when you're first starting out, it's gonna go horribly wrong lots of times. I mean, that's just learning to teach. But after a while, you kind of figure out your groove and like which ages you really connect with. And so there, and you know, there's just certain ages you just don't connect with, or
Mhm.
you don't have too much experience yet in classroom management, because classroom management's a big skill that teachers have to
Mhm.
learn as well. But yeah, I think those bad days, you just kind of, or sometimes the kids are just having a bad day,
Yeah.
especially when it's close to Christmas. Like
Yeah.
it's just, and you just have to chalk it up to that and go in the next day, and you know, it'll pass. But I think, I mean, I've taught so many different ages for over many, many years, and
Mhm.
it's always a learning experience, and you never can say how it's going to go.
Yeah.
Like
Or
you saw me running around here earlier today. I mean, I've been hosting this program for quite a while, but like which is very similar. Like you never know how a class is going to work out. You know,
yeah.
it's a different group every time, and ages.
Yeah.
I mean, even, you know, I remember when I first started teaching the ages 3 to 5, and the difference between a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old is massive.
Yeah.
Usually, not always, but a lot of times it is. And it took me a long time to figure that out, and like how to manage that particular age group.
Mhm.
And it taught me which ages I want to work with and which ones I don't.
Yeah. Also too, like again, like ask for help. I know it depends on what resources are accessible, but sometimes too, I remember one situation I had was I had a student and who you know, he had some learning disabilities, and but he would often act out, and which is, you know, completely okay, but it's just I found that it was hard for me to, you know, focus on him while also focusing on the rest of the class, in which case I just had to ask for help to have another adult just come in, and where they didn't have to necessarily shadow me all the time, but to just, you know, if I'm not able to catch something or see something, they're able to kind of float in and assist him or assist somebody else while I'm helping him. So, you know, that's another option too. But yeah, I mean, like Kathy said, sometimes you can have a lesson plan to the T. Like just you walk in and you're like, I got this. And then 20 minutes in, you're like, I don't have this, you know, in which case you just have to adapt, right? But yeah, that's what I would recommend.
And there's a good comment I just want to read here. Someone saying, thanks for all the excellent info. But just saying how arts is very important to anyone to invest their time. Teaching with empathy is spot on. And I think that really, you know, breaks it down, is being empathetic with your students, whoever they are, and to yourself.
And to yourself too. Exactly. No, it's a lot of it takes a lot of mental, emotional energy. So like it's not easy to show up as your best self. And I don't want to like preach to toxic positivity, but you do have to try and look after yourself and prioritize your self-care, you know, whatever that looks like for each person. Yeah, thank you for your question.
Any other comments or questions? Because otherwise I think I will say goodbye to the online audience and then we can chat some more. Thank you all for joining us. Good night, and we'll see you in 2025.